So let's start with our describe and explain. And the first part of describe and explain we're going to look at are the actual stages of sleep. So remember we talked about biological rhythms way back before Christmas, and we talked about that idea of the circadian rhythm that takes place over the course of a day. Remember, circa, Latin for about, dies, Latin for a day, about a day. Well, that's a sleep-wake cycle as a circadian rhythm, but there's a rhythm within our sleep called an ultradian rhythm because it takes less than a day. So within our sleep, there are 5 stages. Now, this is slightly confusing because depending on how you look at it, some people describe it as 5 stages. Some people describe it as the first couple of stages is divided into 2. So they might talk about 3 stages of sleep, sort of stage 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, stage 3, and then a 4th stage. It's all very confusing. But what you need to understand is that we're going to think about it in terms of 5 stages. There are 4 stages that we think of as non-rapid eye movement sleep, and a 5th stage called rapid eye movement sleep, or we call them NREM and REM for short. A full stage takes between 90 and 110 minutes. So NREM sleep, non-REM sleep. We'll come back to what rapid eye movement actually is in a bit. Don't worry too much about that. The first 2 stages are what we call light sleep. And the first stage of that, 1A, is kind of this really, really light sleep, kind of dozing, where often you're sort of aware of what's going on, but you're kind of nodding off, but you're still kind of in the room, like maybe on a, Wednesday afternoon in a psychology class, maybe. And that's really what we call light sleep. Stage 1 and 2, or 1A and 1B, again, depends on how you want to look at it. But the first 2 stages, however you want to describe them, are a light sleep. Stage 1 is the lightest when we're still really kind of awake, but just starting to nod off. Stage 2 is a little bit deeper. We're sort of, that's that kind of stage when you maybe kind of like, I'm still, that kind of almost asleep, not quite. Or maybe when you've just woken up in the morning, there wasn't an alarm going off, you're just sort of half asleep, you can kind of aware of what's going on around you. So those first 2 stages are called light sleep, okay? Light sleep for obvious reasons. Now, the next 2 stages are very deep sleep. So we call them a deep sleep, or sometimes we call it slow wave sleep. And that's because the kind of brain waves that go on during slow wave sleep are slow. Your brain is much, much slower. It's acting very, very slowly. You're in a deep sleep. It's much harder to wake people up from deep sleep. And your brain activity looks completely different to how your brain activity looks when you're awake. In light sleep, it's still relatively similar, but in slow wave sleep, it's much, much, much slower. And you'll see some images on this on the Adobe Spark page. So when you're awake, you produce these really, really short waves known as beta waves. And that's where your brain is like, whoa, 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 what's going on? What's happening over here? Look at that. Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. That's when you're awake. And in light sleep, you're still producing those beta waves, as well as some slightly longer and slower waves called alpha waves, but mostly beta waves. In slow wave sleep, that's when you've got almost no beta waves and much long and slow waves called theta and delta wave sleep. Now, in the final phase, we have something called REM sleep. So we had light sleep, which is your first 2 phases, slow wave sleep, which is the second 2 phases, and finally, REM sleep. So those first 4 stages together, we call them NREM sleep. And in the 5th stage, we call REM sleep. Now, REM stands for rapid eye movement. When you're in REM sleep, your eyelids are closed, obviously, but your eyes are moving back and forwards very, 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 very quickly. I'm not going to attempt to do it here, but basically your eyes are closed and your eyelids are closed and your eyes are going back and forth like that. And REM sleep is weird, guys, because REM sleep is often known as paradoxical sleep, because even though your body is basically not moving at all, your brain is acting like it's awake. If we look at the brain waves of someone in REM sleep, they look like they're awake. And it might not surprise you, therefore, to understand that that's when we do most of our dreaming, is in REM sleep. So we go through all of these cycles, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and back. So light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep, and then back to light sleep. And we go through that cycle, and over the course of the night, as the slow wave sleep portion gets less and the REM period gets slightly more, okay? So we spend less time in slow wave sleep in each cycle and more time in REM sleep. And these cycles, a full cycle takes about 90 minutes, takes slightly less when you're a wee baby, but a bit more when you're older. And as you'll see in Adobe Spark, I've given you a table that shows that there are lots of different activities going on in these different stages, and they're quite different. One that you might notice is in stage 1A, the first part of light sleep, we have occasional muscle contractions where your body just kind of freezes up like that, and that can make us think that we're falling. I bet a lot of you have had that kind of suddenly waking up from a dream, like suddenly waking up and thinking, oh my God, I'm falling out of bed, and you're not. It's just these weird muscle contractions that your body doesn't understand what's happening, so it kind of interprets them as if you're falling. Then in slow wave sleep, that's when our growth hormones are being produced. We'll talk a lot more about that when we talk about the restoration theory, which comes up later. And it's a very deep sleep. And then in REM sleep, that's when you have that kind of paradoxical sleep. Your brain's going wild as if it's awake and you're kind of thinking about stuff, but your body is essentially paralyzed. It doesn't move. You hardly move during REM sleep. And scientists have theorized that's probably to stop you from acting out your dreams, because that could be awkward. So light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep. We can think of them as 3 stages, or we can subdivide them into 1A, 1B, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But we need to understand that we've got light sleep, slow wave sleep, and REM sleep.